Hey, what's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you two different methods that you can use to clean or fillet a bluegill with an electric fillet knife. I know when we go out fishing for bluegills, it does take quite a few fish to make a meal, so oftentimes we've got a pretty good mess of fish to clean, and that electric fillet knife really makes it go quickly and smoothly. However, there are a few things that you need to know and a few tips and tricks when it comes to filleting a smaller fish like a bluegill with an electric fillet knife to make it go much smoother. So let's get started. All right, guys, really quick before we actually get into filleting these fish, I'm going to show you the setup that I use for panfish. This is the Rapala R12 HD series lithium battery powered fillet knife. There really isn't any need for a corded fillet knife anymore. You can do several sessions with one battery before having to recharge it. No problem with these lithium batteries, and they're pretty light as well. Now, the second feature on this setup is going to be the blades. So this is an aftermarket finesse blade that I've purchased for this knife. And there's a couple reasons I use this blade. You can see here that the original blade is much thicker and it's got much more aggressive teeth than this new finesse blade. When you're filleting small fish like panfish, it's important to have that thinner blade so you have maneuverability and less aggressive teeth so that you don't accidentally cut through the spine or some of those more fine bones that you find on a smaller fish like a bluegill. So whatever brand you're using, I definitely recommend going with that finesse style blade. I will leave a link down below for this finesse blade, also for this knife as well. And one more point about this blade, you can get a shorter blade, but I really prefer the 7.5 inch because I like to get the knife off the table and get it nice and flat when I skin the fish, and that extra little 1.5 inches on the end there gives me a little more room to maneuver, and it definitely doesn't hurt to have a little bit longer blade. So that's my setup. Let's get to cleaning these fish. All right, guys, method number one is going to be the quickest and easiest method, and probably the method that most people use when using an electric fillet knife. The second method is going to get you a little bit more meat, however. So we'll start with this one. We're starting with the initial cut, which is going to be right behind the head here. You'll feel there's a hard bone right here. We're going to start right at that bone. We're going to angle our knife forward like this. And I'm going to put a little bit of a cant on the blades to cut through the scales easier. And I'm going to cut straight down. And then when I get to the spine, I'm going to turn the blade and go horizontally like this. And that's why it's so important to have this thin blade on here, because when you get down, it's hard to turn a thicker blade and make that scoop. So first cut, just like so, kind of rock the blades back and forth to get this meat here and this meat here. And now we're going to turn the blades. So now we've made the turn, we've stopped at the spine, and now we're going to follow the spine all the way down and just ride the spine all the way to the tail. Now, one thing about an electric fillet knife is it's easy to put too much pressure on the blades. You want to tend to push it through, and that's not the best way to do it. You want to let the blades just work their way through. You're just going to put slight pressure down and slight pressure ahead. And if you put too much pressure down, the blades are going to curve and you're going to miss some meat on the edges. And if you put too much pressure forward, you're going to end up running through the spine or cutting stuff you don't want to cut. So make sure you got a good grip here on the head. I like to put my fingers right in the gills. Now we'll start the blades up and just let them do the work. Just like so. See how they went through just like butter? If you force them, it's not going to go that well. So now we can flip that fillet over, and I like to leave the skin attached right here, and now we can use that as a handle to skin the fillet. So we're just going to keep the knife going like so, and we're just going to put slight pressure down, not a lot of pressure, just enough, and just enough angle to keep it going through, and just let the blades do the work again, right on through. All right, now we've got a beautiful fillet there, and all we have left is the ribs right here that we have to take out. Now to take the ribs out, I'm just going to get a grip right here with my left hand and kind of hold this in place. I'm going to place the blade right up against the ribs where they come out here. And I'm going to use the tip of my knife. If I use the back of the knife, I'm going to end up cutting back in here. So I'm going to go all the way to the tip of my knife, get it started, and then I'm just going to scoop those ribs out. So follow the ribs. And again, another reason to have these scalloped thinner blades so you don't cut through these ribs. And you don't have to keep the knife on all the time. You can kind of feather it through and then come up on this side just like that. And there you've got the ribs scooped out pretty thin, pretty efficient, not bad. So there's your fillet from that side. Pretty clean, pretty nice fillet. And you can do this a lot faster when you get practice. So let's do the other side quick and then I'll show you the other method. So to do this side, we're just gonna flip the fish over. And I always like to have the head on the left-hand side just because I'm right-handed. That's the way I do it with an electric. And it works good for me. So now we're gonna angle our blade the same way we did before. Obviously it's gonna be facing away from us now, so we're at a little bit different angle. We're gonna do that same cut, kind of rock that blade down through. Now we're gonna turn the blade again when we hit the spine and just let it go through. And you can kind of rock it as you go to get through that fish, but don't put a lot of pressure again. Okay, now we're at the tail. Now we flip it again and just make that cut. Keep going and continuing all the way down the skin, like so. There's fillet number 2. Now we can get rid of the carcass here. Now to scoop these ribs, I'm gonna actually do the same thing. I'm gonna flip the fillet so I can put my hand on this side of the ribs and we're gonna scoop them out similar to how we did before. So just get under those ribs and follow them right up like that. And there is fillet number 2, beautiful. So that's basically it. You've got 2 nice fillets there, really clean. And once you get good at this, you can do it really, really fast. So let's move to method number 2. Okay, with this method, we're gonna try and get a little more meat off of this fish. If you're trying to be really efficient and get the most out of the fish possible, this is usually the best way to do it. And I wanna mention too, if you're trying to use an electric fillet knife for really small bluegills, it's gonna be really tough. I like to use them for 8-inch bluegills and bigger. This is about an 8.5 incher here, and that's a perfect size to use an electric fillet knife on. All right, so the first cut we're gonna make is gonna be very similar to our initial fish, but we're actually going to curve it a little bit to try and get a little more of this head meat and a little bit more down in here. So as I cut, I'm gonna actually curve that knife. So I'm gonna start right about here, almost straight up and down, right behind this pectoral fin here. I'm gonna get that cut going, and then I'm actually gonna swing the knife up in here a little bit. So I'm making a little bit of a curve, and you can see I get a little more meat up here and a little bit more down here. Now it takes a little longer, but again, we're trying to get the most out of this fish that we can. Now we can turn that knife like we did in the last method. Turn it, let it work down the spine again. Let the knife do the work. Now in this method, I'm actually gonna cut the fillet right off. I'm gonna go right through the tail. And you can see that we got a little bit more meat up in here, down in here, and then a little bit more on the tail that we're gonna get as well. So we can scoot this back now. Now I can lay this right at the edge of the table, and I don't lose any meat here at all on the tail. I just start my cut right there at the edge, and I can get a little bit more meat off this thing just by making sure we get every little scrap. Okay, no meat left at all on the skin there either. When it comes to taking out the ribs, if you want the most meat possible, you really need to use a conventional knife. So I'm gonna grab my conventional knife here, and this is just a little Rapala Fish and Fillet with the Superflex coating on it. Really nice knife. I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. But we're gonna do the same thing, but with this knife, we're gonna be able to get a little bit more finessey with these ribs, and we can kind of work it around and get right up tight to those ribs and get every last little bit of meat off this fish. And work it right up along them all the way out to the end. And you can see it's a little bit cleaner around the ribs there. You just can't do that with an electric fillet knife where you can get so tight to the ribs that there's basically nothing left on them. So if you really want the most meat off your fish, the conventional for taking out the ribs is probably your best bet. And you can cut all these off the fish and then put them in a pile and then take your conventional knife and de-rib them. That's probably the quickest way to do it, but definitely recommend that if you want to get the most meat off your fish. So let's do the other side now. All right, so again, we're gonna kind of try and make this a bit of a a curved cut here. So we're gonna start up here and we're gonna work our way down like this. Get a little bit more meat there. Now we turn the knife, follow the spine. Again, not pushing, just letting the knife go through all the way off the fish. There we go. Bring it right to the edge of the table and take that skin right off. Get right up tight to those ribs, following them all the way out and up, like so. Again, a little bit more meat on that fillet than the original method. So there you go, guys. That's basically how you do it. So here you can see the difference between method 1 and method 2. This is a great method. However, it doesn't get as much meat. It's quicker. This method definitely has a little bit cleaner looking, nicer fillets. And that's kind of the difference between the two. They're both acceptable. Just depends on how much time you have and what your goals are. Well, there you have it, guys. There's a couple ways you can fillet a bluegill with an electric fillet knife. Hopefully one of them works for you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel because I've got a lot more good fillet tutorials out there and a lot more videos coming up. So thanks again, guys. Get hooked up.